the Irrational Confidence Podcast. The top 25,
honorable mention,
just a bit outside. The West Virginia Mountaineers. Let's go Mountaineers. Let's drink some beers. 9-4 last year. Neal Brown, we thought he was done.
They'll be right there in the discussion for that conference, the Big 12 title.
I got them 10-2 best case. All right, Fresh, let's go to our 2016, the one team. Ladies and gentlemen, I was so hoping this team would make our top 25, and they didn't. But it's time. Ladies and gentlemen, right before we got on here, I told Fresh I need an extra minute or two so I could finish listening to John Denver's Country Roads Take Me Home. It's a place I belong. Morgantown, West Virginia. The West Virginia Mountaineers. Let's go Mountaineers. Let's drink some beers. I love this team, Fresh. I love this team. I love this team. I love this team. 9-4 last year. Neal Brown, we thought he was done. We thought his goose was cooked. He was going to be the first coach fired last year, and he's not. He's not the first coach out. He winds up pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Garrett Green, awesome dual threat quarterback, probably one of the better dual threat quarterbacks. Get your popcorn ready because he's going to be a fun one to watch. They bring back 89% of their offensive production from last year. But, and again, this is the but, and I'll turn over to you here in a second here, Fresh. We talked about this the other day. One of two things is going to happen. This schedule is either filled with minefields and is going to be ridiculously, or we are going to talk a lot of Mountaineer football all season long.
I mean, great start off bringing back that massive amount of offensive production. Garrett Green has matured over time. Obviously, 2 years ago, he kind of came out late for JT Daniels. Everyone thought JT Daniels was going to be the guy in 23 or 22. He obviously leaves last year. Green takes over, and you start seeing the growth and maturity. And I personally think there's still more room for him to even get better. But then you add in Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson, two amazing running backs. So the three of them together just run the rock all over West Virginia. They were fourth in FBS in rushing yards per game last year at 228.9. They ran the ball all over the place. If they can keep that kind of discipline and that production up, they're going to be in a great spot. It is going to really suck missing Zach Frazier, the star, Mr. Everything center who kept the offensive line together. If they can have that offensive line still remain that cohesive and find that drive, these guys, plus I think a more developed passing game with another year of Garrett Green there under center, it's going to make them even more lethal. It's fun, you mentioned Neal Brown, the guy. Maybe the players rallied. Maybe he finally got his guys to actually show up. They had, a talented and adept and experienced players, but they showed up for their coaches, showed up for each other. And I think it was a springboard coming into this year. Guys have confidence. Like, look, we can do this. We can actually win. Right. You didn't see Green, you didn't see White, you didn't see Donaldson transfer out. In the day of the transfer portal, they stayed put. They have unfinished business there in Morgantown. And that is going to be, I think, a leadership factor that you haven't seen before. It's not the X's and O's this time. It's who's in the locker room, who's the voice of the entire squad, keeping those guys motivated to play for each other and to go on and take on the challenges. This schedule is extremely daunting. They could be a dominant football team, or they could really see that, we're good,
Iowa State,
but we're not elite. Yeah, we're like you're waiting for them to break through. I'm going to skip ahead. I'm just going to talk about the schedule, folks, because late September into October,
this is
Kansas at Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Kansas State. That's my tough 4 games. But then after that, you go to Tucson to play Arizona. So that's a 5-game stretch right there that could make or break the Mountaineer Nation. If this team could go 3-2 out of that stretch, at worst, this is a 9-3, 10-2 football team, and they're blowing people down. Obviously, they got Penn State on the schedule. That's another daunting task. If they go through this and they start dealing with injuries, just can't find a way to squeak it out, it could, unfortunately, the wheels could fall off. So it's a Where's the leadership and the unity on this team to keep them all together? It's not can these guys play. It's not can the guys tackle. Can they hit the hole that they run? It's will they play for each other when they go through a tough time during the season, when they're in a very tough stretch? Can they fight for each other and stay together? Because if they can, the talent is there for the Mountaineers to go through. And if you're a Mountaineer fan, you need to show up loud and
Gosh, yeah.
drunk every single game. You have all these games, all the tough games are at home. You got Penn State, Kansas, Iowa State, Kansas State, Baylor, and UCF all at home. You've got to turn up, burn the couches, drink the beers, get loud, be proud. Because if you're giving them energy, those guys are going to find that extra gear later on.
Mm.
You've got to literally be the 12th man up there, fight for the boys. They're going to fight for you. And that's where it's weird stories where they have talent, they have the game, all the games at home. Like it's a perfect setting. Can they get the storybook ending? Can they all fight for each other and drive it home? That's what I'm really, really eager to see, this season.
Fresh. This Mountaineer team is just, it's so fascinating because they have, you talk about losing Frazier. Was he first or second round? I don't remember off the top of my head here. He was a first or second round pick.
Yeah. The draft is out of my mind.
Right. But you take a look at this team ran the football 565 times last year, almost for 3,000 yards. They were averaging 5.3 yards to carry. This is a lethal rushing attack. And again, I don't want to take away from losing Frazier, but when you're returning 4 guys on that offensive line and you only have to replace 1 to kind of get that guy up to speed, I don't think they're going to drop off at all on the ground here. And it isn't just a one-person thing. It isn't just Jaheim White. It isn't just C.J. Downson. It isn't just the quarterback, Garrett Green. It isn't just that one tailback. Like, this is a very difficult offense to prepare for. Garrett Green does need to increase his completions percentage, only 53% completion rate there as well. But they protect him. Kid only took 5 sacks on the year. That shows you how good that offensive line is. Now, again, they're a more predominant rushing attack than they are a passing attack here. But the fact that he only takes 5 sacks is huge. And you forgot also Hudson Clement, the sophomore, the guy that loves being at West Virginia. I think he's the next, great guy to step up. But you're right. When we can talk about every single thing that's going on with this football team, we talk about the X's and O's, it really does come down to how they perform on the schedule as well. I'm with you. The 4-game stretch here, Fresh, is starting with going to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Not an easy place to play in Boone Pickens Stadium. And then capping off at Arizona in Tucson, traveling across the country. That's another tough one. But, Kansas is going to be a good team going into Morgantown. Iowa State, Campbell's got that team ready to play.
They're always scrappy.
Right. Kansas State is one of the better teams in the Big 12 right now. You're taking a look at this in your first 8 games. Realistically, you could make an argument that 6 out of these first 8 games are teams up against the top, I'm just going to say top 35 in college football. I don't think I'd rank Iowa State in there, but I would say Iowa State probably is sitting in the 35 spot. I don't even remember. I don't think they made our top. Yeah, they didn't make our top 25. But
no.
But I would say they're in the top 35. And Dan Campbell's a good coach. So this is going to be.
Well, Dan Campbell's coaching Iowa State. They're really good. Matt Campbell.
Thank you. Too many Campbells out there. Campbell's soup. They're probably all related.
Biting kneecaps there in Iowa. That's a little aggressive.
Listen, Mountaineer fans bite some kneecaps. But Morgantown is one of the top places that when we talk about college football, Fresh, Morgantown is one of the elite venues for college football. It isn't the same size as going to a place like the Big House or It's not like the Swamp where it's 100,000 people in there. But it is maybe one of the most passionate fan bases, one of the most supportive fan bases. And I love the fact that you said, go out there, tailgate, have a good time, drink. Let's go Mountaineers, drink some beers, burn some couches, as long as that's legal in West Virginia. I don't know about what West Virginia laws are, so check in on that before you do that. But guys, have fun, because this is the great thing about college football is West Virginia is set up that you're going into the season with excitement. And if you go week 1 and you pull off the upset in Morgantown against Penn State, and that's not a crazy ask right there. Penn State's good, but it's not a crazy ask to say beat the Nittany Lions in Morgantown. That game's going to be really, really close. And especially if you can cap it off with going 4-0 in that first 4 against Kansas, then into that difficult stretch, you going 4-0 fresh every single week. I feel like we'd be previewing a West Virginia game. Now, I don't think do that, but again, they're going to be a top 20 team. These teams are going to be solid as well. And, West Virginia would be one of those sneaky playoff teams. A team that, if everything falls right for them, if Garrett Green makes that jump that we think he's going to do, he kind of be, he says his 2 guys he looked up to as a kid was Baker Mayfield and Johnny Manziel. Like, again, maybe not do some of the things off the field, but on the field, great. This could really be like the story. Like, this could be the story of college football this year.
Well, 3 things I'll make a point on. You talk about potentially a playoff team. There are 12 teams in the playoff now. Everyone, if you haven't got that notice yet. The first round, those are at college sites. You're probably going to be dealing with weather. If this team can run the football in a snowy or, slushy, cold, nasty, setting, that's a big advantage, because running the football when weather is nasty, you see it in the NFL all the time. Can you run the ball in September? Nobody cares. Can you run the ball in December and January? That's what matters. Right. If the team has a ground game, they can slow it down. They can hold the football, run the clock, deal with it, give their defense a rest. All of it comes into play. The short yardage football game is what really matters. And the trenches matter. My next point, last year, this West Virginia defense led the Big 12 in sacks. They had 33. The reason why? They got early leads. They ran the football down people's throat. And then late in the football game, they let the pass rushers unleash and go after them. And on the offensive side of the ball, you mentioned, Garrett Green only had 5 sacks. As a team, they only gave up 10 sacks, which led the Big 12. They don't allow sacks. They run the football. They build a lead, and then late in the ball game, their pass rush gets home. They build to play football late in the year, and they show up early on and make sure those games late matter.
Fresh, could you imagine? We're looking at first round of the playoff, and a team like, let's say West Virginia wins the Big 12 or gets to host a playoff game, and a team like Florida State has to try to come into Morgantown, or a team like Auburn has to try to come into Morgantown in December when it's cold, and then go up against an offensive line like this and a running back attack. They're not going. Again, would I say this team could win a national title? Nah, it's a little bit of a stretch. Could I say this team wins a playoff game if the game's in Morgantown? Yeah.
Well, and it's kind of funny you make that point. So a few years back, there was a Sugar Bowl play in Atlanta after Katrina hit New Orleans. West Virginia versus Georgia in Atlanta in a Sugar Bowl. Steve-O from our buddy here and I went to the ball game. Nobody in the stadium cared about West Virginia, had no idea who they were. We found out about Rich Rodriguez, Pat White, and Steve Slayton really fast, and it was very painful. Everybody underestimated West Virginia, and they beat the brakes off the Dogs. Steve-O and myself could not listen to Country Roads for probably the next 3 to 5 years, and I'm sure I'm not in the minority when it comes to that. You can't underestimate West Virginia in a big game, because they already feel that they're being underestimated anyway, and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to come out there and attack you when you give them zero chance. That's what they're built on. That's kind of their motto is, You don't care about us. We're going to get you. And you got to pay attention. You got to give them respect because the Mountaineers will get you, and their fans will make sure you hear about it for a long time.
Right. Or you go back to like 2011 when they hung like a 70 spot on Clemson in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, they're ruthless. There's, as the kids say, no chill.
Yeah. Hey, all right, Fresh. We're making some bold predictions here. What do you got West Virginia's ceiling?
9-3. I think
Ooh.
the
I think
schedule's
you're
very, very tough. I think
ooh.
9-3 they could find ways to navigate that.
What are your I'm curious, what are your 3 losses? In the best case scenario for them.
I think a close loss to Penn State,
Okay.
Kansas State, and I'm just going to say there's going to be a sprinkle of a loss. Like a one that they shouldn't lose will happen somewhere along the way. The K-State game, I think that team is very, very good. And then Penn State early on, that's going to be a great ball game. But I think Penn State finds a way to squeak it out and win maybe like a 24-21 kind of game. Kansas State, very the same way. And then they sort of just trip up somewhere for that third loss. 2 conference losses might get them into that title game, might be that third place team, but they'll be right there in the discussion for that conference, the Big 12 title.
I got them 10-2 best case scenario. I don't disagree with you at all that the schedule is tough, and I think that there are, again, we're talking best case scenario here, not what's going to happen, but if all things work out right for them, best case scenario, this is a murderous schedule again, and we took a look at it because we didn't even bring up the fact that they got to go to Lubbock, Texas at the very end of the season to play Texas Tech, which is, again, not a
It's the middle of
great,
nowhere, folks.
right, it's
It's
not
the
a
middle of nowhere.
great team, but it's not a it's not an
It's a
easy one
raucous
to win.
environment.
Right.
It's a raucous environment.
I could legitimately see them if you told me that they lose to Penn State in close game and lose to Texas Tech to bookend the season, but then they ran the table. I'd be like, it's going to be a fun West Virginia team, and a lot of people are going to talk about that. But again, best case scenario, I got 10-2 because I could see them upsetting Penn State, but like losing a game, like going to Stillwater would be tough for me. I love the fact that how many games they get in Morgantown, which I think it will make it a brutal thing for these teams to come in and play there. I'd say worst case scenario, again, this schedule is tough, Fresh. Worst case scenario for me is 6-6.
My worst case was 5-7. It's just the way the team played so well last year.
Right.
They're going to have to do that plus a little bit more. And hey, anything can happen. But if something bad happens, or if Garrett Green gets dinged up because he has had some injuries in the past, the wheels could fall off just because you lose a magical player quarterback like that.